4, 3, 2, 1. Wait for the claps. Wait for the air horn. Welcome to the drum stream. We're very happy to have the 8020 drummer Nate Smith here with us today, as well as always, Brandon Medellin from Austin, Texas, and I'm your host, Matthew Smith from Long Beach, California. We're super happy, super stoked, 100% enthralled to have Nate Smith here on our stream today. While we wait for people to come on in and patch in, Nate, let me ask you the first question here. What is filling your bucket lately?
What's filling my bucket? Well, that's one of those podcast specific questions. What do you want to tell Fire Nation on Jumping Dumas or something? Well, I'm super busy this spring. I'm doing a video every week, which takes a ton of my time and energy, and that's been my main focus for the last little while. But as I was saying before we started recording, I'm also developing like two new teaching things in parallel that I'm pretty excited about, and also have some collabs I'm doing behind the scenes that are going to hit the channel pretty soon. So yeah, I feel like I'm juggling a lot of balls, but having fun with all of it.
Can you tell us any of the collabs, or are they secret?
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah, the next one coming up is this YouTuber named Jacob Evans, who I was super inspired by. I'd had my eye on for a couple of years, but then we both did this Drumeo timing challenge thing, and he absolutely nailed it. So we started talking, and we're going to do something together, at least one collab, and we've already started sending stuff back and forth, and it's going to be funny and fun, hopefully.
Man, cool. Are you do you feel like even like post COVID, like collaboration's kind of the name of the game?
I think so, and maybe I should have leaned into it a little bit harder. I've always kind of just done my introvert thing with my camera in my practice room, but I did one at the beginning of the year with David Kola, Josh Crawford, and Raghav. That was a ton of fun, and that just sort of whet my appetite for more. But yeah, like it seems like the rest of the world kind of caught up to the possibility of internet collaboration this past year, when I think a few of us have been sort of on that train for a minute.
Sure. Well, heck yeah. What about you, Brandon? What's filling your bucket?
Just playing. I mean, Austin is opening up shows now that everyone's getting the vaccine. So I've been just focusing on linking with certain just kind of like promoters now. Like we had one show, and like I just got flooded because nobody has seen music really here in a while. So we had like one really, like, it was a social distance show. There's like this bar that has a huge patio, and we played it, and like just so many people were just like hitting us up, and like I don't know, it's just kind of overwhelming right now, just like in the state of the world, and like, you know, just working on my new record, and like just where everything's going. So like I've just been really caught up on like the fast momentum of like what it is to do music right now, and especially like now that things are opening up just you know, gradually a tad bit, you know. So
Sure.
it's pretty much all I'm on right now,
Feel
just
that.
kind of riding that wave. Yusef from Minaret will be here tomorrow. Dakota will be here the next day after that. So I'm happy. It's that LA.
Are you guys just kicking it, or are you doing something for Minaret?
Doing promotion for Minaret. We're gonna get my band Instagram ready. We're gonna do some promotional videos for the new album. So just kind of like press stuff.
Cool. Man, that's awesome.
What's a socially distanced gig like? Like, is the whole audience standing 6 feet apart from everybody else?
Okay,
Like, that
so
sounds like a modern art installation.
y'all want the real deal? So
Yeah,
basically, so basically, it was like a big tent. Imagine like so what where we played was like imagine the stage right here, and then like everyone's sitting right here, and it's a long tent, right? And there's like a bunch of like picnic tables lined up for like probably about 150 feet. There's probably like maybe 40 picnic tables, and everybody is just required to wear a mask when they get up. But when they sit down, they can like order, drink, eat food like without a mask, and then they just watch us. And then people who are at the front, like there's some space for people to go up to the front. They, you just wear a mask while you're like at the front. That's just how it works right now.
Yeah, the
But
social
I hope
distance
you had a
gig.
good PA.
oh yeah, it was great. No, it was great. It was super, like I said, overwhelming. Like I played in front of like 200 people. Um and it was like uh people were spaced apart though, and some people came up to the front, and like, you have to wear a mask, and everyone's like vaccinated, right? Everyone's getting vaccines right now, so everyone's kind of like, kind of maintaining distance, but also kind of like
Yeah,
they're ready to socialize. It's just a balance. It's like everything's like in a really intense experimental kind of stage. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like, I don't know, kind of
yeah, I
crazy.
know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, man. I think I'm playing a gig today actually, and it's technically a socially distanced gig outside of a dispensary. Because it's the 420 gig.
Of course it is.
Yeah, and it's everyone wears a mask. I know in California specifically, like everyone's very how do I say it? Not everyone, but uh, there's a lot of people that have gotten both shots. More, no, I'm not a crazy guy about numbers, but I think there's a lot of us that have gotten, at least everyone in the band has gotten fully vaccinated. So that's nice. Um, and everyone over 16 can get one now, so that's kind of tight.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like try not to get political about the vaccines, but if it's available to everyone who wants it, that's a good thing, right?
absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as long as the option is there for anybody who just like feels the need to go get that. I mean, I think that's important, right? Just to have that option.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, y'all. What up, Caleb? What up, Beluga Ben? What up, Carloro? We are slowly populating the stream here. This is awesome.
Hey Nate, what part of New York? You live in New York, right?
Yeah, Brooklyn.
Brooklyn. Oh, okay, Brooklyn. Oh, that's what I was gonna ask. What part?
Yeah, I love it. We moved to Brooklyn in 2012 after we lived in Manhattan for a long time in Queens a little bit. Uh, but yeah, I think I'll have Brooklyn roots in Brooklyn for the next little while. Like it's the perfect balance of kind of urban, but also like not too crazy. Manhattan is a little bit nuts.
How often do you use your car?
Every day, pretty much.
Every
I
day.
actually try to not use it, and now that the weather's getting nicer, it's easier. My studio is only a 10-minute walk away, but if the weather's shitty, like I don't have anything to prove. I'll
Yeah,
just drive.
yeah, you're like, yeah.
Is there parking at your studio, or do you have to find like street parking?
You know how it goes, man. In New York, it's a mess. It's catch as catch can. One hack is to like play chicken with the fire hydrants and be the guy that has a slightly higher risk tolerance than everybody else, because usually that's where the gold is. But every 10 times or so, you get a ticket. So
Dang. Well, make sure you tip today, y'all, so we can pay Nate's parking tickets.
snap,
And
parking ticket fun. Don't let me get that boot.
yeah, don't get the boot. Yeah,
That's where
for
all
real.
all the Patreon money goes to the parking tickets. It's
Yeah.
cool.
Well, cool, y'all. We got a lot of people up here. We got 9 people in the room. What's up, y'all? If you say hey, we'll say hey. And let's move on. Let's get on right straight to it. As far as I know, my thing is getting there. It is the drum news, everybody.
Drummers.
Drum news. Um, this is really fun. Our last week's let me look. Our last week's guest, Kevin Higuchi. Oh, look, it's Nate. Um, just released or just became part of the release of Jeff Rosenstock's latest record. which is a follow-up to No Dream, which is called Ska Dream. And as soon as and Ska Dream came out. It was a 420 release, obviously, just today. So that's a very cool thing. So shout out to Kevin and Jeff Rosenstock and all the people. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Jeff's work, but he has a pretty huge root in ska music with his old band, old band called Arrogant Sons of Bitches. And so I've been a big Jeff fan for years. Jeff's also, in my opinion, the king of DIY punk by letting all his music go for free. And he was, to me, one of the first people that I knew that was giving it all away for free at his tier of person. Another cool thing, and it's interesting, but Zildjian has gotten into the released 2 new practice pads, one of which is this 12-inch Galaxy practice pad, and the other which is a 6-inch graffiti pad. For everyone that has now you can stare at a nice practice pad instead of your Vader red practice pad or your Real Feel gray practice pad. I do believe that everyone should have a practice pad. If you don't, go get one. This happened last week, but this is also very cool. Pearl turned 75 last week, and they are celebrating by re-releasing this. It's called the President's Series Phonetic Kit. I'm kind of a.
The answer is yes.
Yeah, I'm kind of.
Yes, Pearl, I will take one. Thank you.
Pearl, if you're listening, we all want a kit. So I'm kind of a big fan of like the old Pearl logo versus,
That's what I was gonna ask. It's kind of blurry, but that old Pearl badge is on there, right? The ones that's kind of like the Rogers logo.
Yeah. So yeah, you can't. This is certainly an old school decal here, but it's definitely it looks like the old Rogers stuff.
Yeah, the old Pearl badge, man.
So I guess here's the president guy, Katsumi Yanagisawa founded Pearl. And then here's some pretty old pictures of everyone like making drums in one of the old factories. Really cool. Shout out to Pearl. Pearl's, I've never been a big fan of Pearl, full disclosure, but I do like their old logo. So, and then here we go. Let's get into it because the sound of metal. Everyone's new favorite drum movie that came out this year. Probably one of the more heart-wrenching drum movies versus, Drumline and Whiplash, obviously. They're the first, they just won an award, the CAS Award, Cinema Audio Society, for Best Sound Design, which is cool. They're also in the running for 6 Oscar nominations and 1 Golden Globe. It's streaming on Amazon. If anyone's hasn't seen it and you have an Amazon Prime account, shame on you, because you gotta squeeze all that stuff out of Jeff Bezos when you can. So yeah,
I've been asleep at the wheel on this. Obviously, I need to do a jazz drummer reacts to Sound of Metal video.
Yeah, I can't believe that's not on the list. Well,
it is now.
Glad you came on, because if you haven't seen Sound of Metal, it's about a drummer who is playing with his band and finds himself going deaf from too much exposure to loud noises. And I won't give away much more of the plot there. Certainly one to go check out. Again, you might cry. I cried. So
it's the dark side of high cymbal gang. Gotta play those cymbals lower. Protect those ears, guys.
Oh no.
Damn. Yeah. So remember, guys, wear your earplugs. Otherwise, you might not be able to hear above 10K. Anyway, let's get on to our guest here, Nate Smith. Welcome to the stream, to the fun. We're also still stoked to have you here, rocking the middle slot on the drum stream. So, let's get right into it. I would love to know, how you started playing the drums and what, maybe some of your early mentors were.
Yeah. Okay. I got a couple for you. So I started embarrassingly young. Like I'm one of these guys that should be way better for how long I've been playing. But I guess my excuse is I didn't really take it seriously until maybe like 18 or 19. But I was one of these guys who, when I was 4 or 5, I was playing on pots and pans, quite literally. My probably earliest influence was Stuart Copeland. So we had a bunch of police records around, and I would just drum to Stuart Copeland. So eventually, my parents got me a tiny drum kit, and then life happened. Had other interests, but picked it back up in high school. Didn't really start taking lessons seriously until high school. I had a great teacher who's really creative and also really solid, just rudimentally, and just didn't brook any bullshit. Like anytime I thought I was doing something fancy, he was always just like, "Yeah, but can you play it on the mutes? Can you play it clean?" And then I think he joined a right wing militia, and I think the owner of that music store has like a restraining order against him now. So that happened.
Dang.
Yeah, yeah, nice guy, but like he was talking to me about some like crazy right wing conspiracy theories even when I was like 12 or 13, and
Like
I
during your
remember.
lessons?
Yeah,
Bro,
yeah,
I was taking money from you.
we spent an entire lesson talking about how I shouldn't pay taxes, and I was like, "Well, I'm 13," and then I came home and I was like, "Mom, Dad, guess what my teacher said?" And they're like, "I think we need to talk to your teacher." I'm like, "I don't understand."
Jeez.
But yeah, there were early warning signs if I'd been observant enough to catch them, which I wasn't. But yeah, then started playing again in high school. High school had a really strong band program, and it was a lot of fun. It was like, besides sports, it was kind of like the coolest thing to do for the nerds, I guess. So played in jazz band, played in concert band, then took it seriously enough to go to school for it, although I wasn't very good through college and grad school. So pretty much just got my ass kicked, and then graduated, did the whole thing, moved to New York, was playing gigs. Um, yeah, in terms of influences, I should say I studied with John Riley in school, and he's fantastic. Both in terms of mindset and playing. But I think he was the opposite of Terrence Fletcher. Like he could see I needed a confidence boost, so he wasn't a hard ass at all. He was just like trying to get me to believe in myself and be more creative. And yeah, so fast forward 10,000 hours in the shed later, and a few years on YouTube, and boom.
Did he okay, so I would love to hear kind of more about John. Did first did he use his books in lessons?
Not unless you asked.
Okay.
So on the spectrum between, hey guys, I wrote this, we're going to play it cover to cover, one lesson a day, and what book? He was like 95% to the what book thing. It was very focused on, you come in, what are your issues this week? What do you want to work on?
Okay.
So in that sense, it was very sort of self-directed, and I was glad that I had a more of a disciplinarian in undergrad who, I'll shout him out, Dane Richardson at Lawrence University,
Sure.
who, yeah, very, very good teacher, much stricter, much more old school.
Mm-hmm. Like a hands guy,
I don't want
like a rudimental ritual nerd or what?
everything, everything.
Heck yeah.
And a guy who, like me, sort of reading between the lines, was kind of like a latter day adoptee of a lot of the fundamentals. So had almost like a he had a really, really fresh and nuanced take on a lot of things, and a lot of it was lost on me at that time. But he I think without Dane, I wouldn't have been able to get as much from John, just because Dane was very structured. Without going all the way over into Terrence Fletcher territory. It was all of this sort of good things about the old school structure from Terrence, I guess you could say. And then John, was just like, what do you want to work on this week? What are you struggling with? And only very occasionally, if you're like, oh, I want to learn to do this thing, he'd be like, well, there is this thing from my book that if you like play triplets around the resolution points, then a couple students have had success with that. Check it out and see what you think.
Mm-hmm. Which remind me again, and maybe our listeners again, what school John Riley teaches at?
So he teaches at a couple, but I studied with him at Manhattan School of Music.
Okay.
I think at the time he was teaching also at William Patterson and SUNY Purchase, which is State College in New York.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Well, man, that's awesome. I think I don't know if anyone out there hasn't checked out John Riley and been in New York on a Monday night, you can do both, and go check him out with the Village. I had this funny John story where I was getting pizza at the shop right next to the Village, and
love that spot.
And I saw John walk in, and I was it was like 2014, and I was like 22 or 24 or something, and I was very, in the shed at that point, and like shedding his books, and I was like, whoa, like there he is, and if there's any like, LA people have their LA moments where they see like, stars in the wild or getting a coffee or something, and then
Davey Litch.
Yeah, I just saw John Riley ordering a slice of pizza like me, and I was like, yeah, heck yeah. I went up to him, bro. I called him Mr. Riley because I was just, this person, and I was like, man, I love all your books. He's like, oh, cool. I gotta go. See you later. I'm like, okay, bye. And anyway, I tried to get as close as I can in the Village, but I ended up sitting on the base, or on the complete other side of the room, which is also a good place to watch. So yeah,
every part of that room sounds good.
I agree, and it's just such a vibe to be in there. I hope. Do you know? And just to go off on a little tangent here, how is the New York scene dealing with venues closing, and is the Village still doing stuff specifically, or are there any venues that are being innovative in their show techniques right now?
Yeah, so I think both the Vanguard and Smalls are doing virtual gigs, which on the one hand is like, well, why would you do it from Smalls? Why not just do it from somebody's living room or Systems 2 or something? But on the other hand, when you think about, there are like these iconic clubs that you want to keep open, and it gives people an opportunity to donate. I think it's great. They figured it out in a hurry, and Spike Wilner, who was actually a classmate of mine at MSM, I think I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think he's either co-owner or just like head manager. But he was really on top of that. I forget where I heard this, but I heard somebody say like Smalls was doing decently, and they were gonna pull through.
Well, Smalls had a broadcasting system already in place, right? They had a subscription system where like you can go see.
It's true, right? Yeah.
So like they were almost ready. I mean, well, they were ready, but maybe they didn't want to be that ready for this,
Yeah.
It's really nice to see that those venues are still holding stuff. I think, it is a very small spot. The special, I don't know if you go down there and you grab the special, you get a Pabst Blue Ribbon and a shot of whiskey for $5 for those who partake in that. That's probably one of the best deals, minus the $20 cover in the world to me in New York City, where it's like $7.
Yeah, never done that. So among other things that I took for granted before COVID, speaking of the Vanguard band, I also had a text exchange with John where he's like, yeah, come down and see me Monday night. And I'm like, yeah, sure, we'll totally make that happen. And then life happened and I didn't get around to it. And then COVID, and I was just like, oh shit, like I should have done that. It just rubs it in your face that you didn't take advantage while you had the chance.
Right.
Same thing with the special, like, hopefully things will open up more, and yeah, I'll be Johnny on the spot to do that now. Whereas before I was just like, yeah, Netflix and chill.
Right. Right. Well, god dang. Let's kind of move on to, something that I mean, in my opinion, I think that's, a huge reason that a lot of people know who you are. You're the 8020 drummer, man. You've accomplished a lot on YouTube. You have 85,500 subscribers as of this morning when I checked. How did you come upon, YouTube? I'm not sure. I don't normally ask people how old they are, but I'm assuming you were at the age where it was just a perfect time to get into YouTube.
I was actually a few years too late.
Tell me why.
I think Harry Meary was the perfect time. I think my friend Scott Devine, who runs Scott's bass lessons, he's an amazing player and he's got an amazing work ethic, and he capitalized. But I feel like if I had been like 3 years earlier to YouTube, and the crazy part of this story was I had put some stuff up on YouTube, and then sort of just let it hang for a couple of years while I was experimenting with some other things. Like it took me a minute to figure out what I wanted to do, and then finally I was like, oh, like maybe I should just make content on YouTube. And then it was like 2015, and I maybe missed the sweet spot by just a couple years. That said, like when there's something to be said for arriving on a platform late as well, if you're willing to put in the work. So I don't. That doesn't bother me. But in terms of just like my journey to YouTube, I actually did make a video about this, somewhat tongue-in-cheek, called "How I Became an International Drum Clinician." and part of my whole thing is just like I want to do another video about the Jake Paul Ben Askren fight. I don't know if you guys are into MMA or anything.
I heard about that.
But Jake Paul's a YouTuber, and whatever you think about him and his brother, like, they might have a slightly more lowest common denominator philosophy than some of us. But I just love the way that the internet world has impinged on the real world, and it's getting harder and harder for people to say like, oh, they're only legit on the internet. They're not legit in real life. And that was part of the impetus for me. I was going through a period where there was a real contraction in the jazz scene, 2009, 2010, just very few live venues, and it was just difficult to get gigs in real life. So around the same time I was getting frustrated about that, I started experimenting with the internet. And part of my original ethos was, I want to show all these guys I can play. And currently the only way to do that is at a live gig or through a session. What if I could just put videos of myself up? And YouTube came along at around the time that it was perfect to do that. But along the way, I also discovered, oh, I actually suck. Because I would have to edit my videos and listen back. And I'd be like, oh shit, that's why I'm not getting gigs. So, the channel growth to a degree mirrored my own journey of reckoning with my own shortcomings. So the internet was indispensable to me in terms of raising my skill level. And it's also amazing because you can, compared to say 2006, now you can just go on Instagram and see exactly where the level is, or on YouTube. So you don't need to be in the dark about your ability at all. Whereas even as late as 2006, 2007, you play in the shed, you're like, I think I sound pretty good. And then you go to a jam session and just get smoked. Like that opacity doesn't exist anymore. Like all you need to do is follow 3 or 4 killers on Instagram. But yeah, that's kind of the big picture.
So, I mean, like, okay. So that
was a lot, I realized.
No. Yeah, it's a lot to unpack, but I understand. As when I was you know, quote unquote in the shed, I remember stumbling upon your channel and having this revelation of the fact, you know, to me, like, one thing I would love to hear you speak about is kind of how you came up with the name and how much you resonate with the concept then and maybe still, because I think I don't want to say the wrong thing, but I like many people love a good like workaround, a good shortcut, a good way to get better faster. And to me, that was kind of your calling card on this channel, was to learn. You know, I felt like you are really good at diagnosing certain isms of certain people, certain players, certain things, breaking it down into really palatable chunks of information. And I also think that you're good at speaking them into the microphone, no matter how many times you think you may have like edited it or whatever. Like your prep and your execution on these videos interested me enough to press the subscribe button, to understand and to eventually, you know, take your online course. So like, you know, how did you come up with the name, and what to an extent do you feel like that concept still resonates with you today?
Yeah. So at the time, it was probably like 2014, 2015 that I had some stuff on YouTube, but I was trying to brand myself a little bit more. Just a second. Let me clear my throat and take a drink.
Got it.
Sorry, had a little bit of a frog in my throat. So one book I read that made a big impression was The Art of Learning by Josh Waitzkin. And maybe one thing that's changed since then is I find Josh Waitzkin to be just slightly insufferable, even though I think he's like one of the smartest human beings I've ever heard. And it's great to listen to him on podcasts. Very, very quick background on Josh Waitzkin. He was a chess prodigy who was the movie Searching for Bobby Fischer was about his life. And he wrote a book that talked about his process of learning to play chess and then porting that process over to learning Tai Chi and then later Jiu-Jitsu, a bunch of great anecdotes about competition and so forth. But 80-20 refers to the fact that in some systems, not all inputs have equal outputs. It's one of those things that once you see, you can't unsee. So, you know, the classic example is in a poppy field, right? Like 20% of the poppy plants yield 80% of the flowers. Or on a sales force, right? Boiler room, like Glenn Ross, like 20% of your sales folks are going to be driving 80% of the revenue. And there are some idiosyncrasies to that. Like, we don't want to go deep down the rabbit hole, but if anyone wants to Google Pareto distribution or power law distribution, there's some really interesting things with it, where if you see a power law distribution in real life, that means probably there's some selectivity happening. Like, once people get more money, it's easier for them to buy influence, so they get more money. So that's why you see these extreme concentrations. But my theory was that it probably existed in learning too. And then when I read Waitzkin's book, that underscored for me that it was true. And to address your question about how do you reconcile there being shortcuts with there being no shortcuts, one way I like to think about it is, say you want to get better at the drums. I think everybody would agree that practicing sprint intervals outside on the streets probably isn't going to make you better at the drums. And once you acknowledge that, you acknowledge that there's a spectrum of applicability to what you're trying to accomplish. Like, practicing certain types of rudiments fall that somewhere on that spectrum. Practicing pure improvisation, practicing grooves, practicing out of a book, recording yourself practicing with the metronome in weird places. And what I think is weird is the assumption that all of these activities are equally applicable at every time in our journey to getting us to our goal. but that's sort of the way. So this is the red pill moment, right? Like that's sort of the way drums are taught, right? It's sequential, and then this is a little conspiracy theory too, but you look into it and it's almost like there's some game theory happening where there's a profit incentive for people who write books to get their books into everybody's hands that's synergistic with the teacher who wants to do as little, to expend as little creative effort as possible, and just, hey Billy, play down page 64, cool, check mark, see you next week, thank you very much for that check.
Yeah.
And nobody's begrudging that. Like I have online courses that do that for me, so I went to the total extreme, right? Like I except for developing the material in the courses, I spend zero time one-to-one mentoring people. But once you realize that, you realize that it's tabula rasa. It's like, okay, so what we're learning is largely arbitrarily ordered and arbitrarily programmed. So what actually does separate an intermediate drummer from an advanced drummer? And I have videos about this, but there were a few people who hearing them at the right period in my life really impressed me. So one of them is this guy, Anthony Lee, who went to Berkeley. He was an underrated jazz drummer who used to play with my friend Daisuke. And the other is this drummer named Arthur Cam, who I had a live shed with in like 2014. And something clicked for me with both of those guys, where it's like, oh, upstream of playing the right rudiments or playing a cool solo is this whole meta space of playing clean, playing in time, and having idea flow so that you're able to execute what's in your head without buffering errors. Yeah. And it's like all of drum pedagogy just skipped over that. Half of it's just like practice your rudiments. There's a lot of platitudes about playing with a good feel and playing in time, although no one ever tells you how. And then it's like, okay, well, now you're ready. Here's your diploma. Go out there and solo. And of course, by pinpointing the actual things that are going to redound to your playing in a way that improve your playing more, you can achieve a goal of leveling up in a shorter amount of time. But it's not a shortcut, because you can't sit down at the piano and cram a Beethoven sonata any more than you can sit down at the drums and cram like improvising a clean Steve Gadd-esque solo over Asia with your own vocabulary. They're unfakeable. But while there may not be shortcuts, there are definitely ways to waste a lot of time.
Wow. You said a lot of great stuff there, man. I appreciate that.
Was it? I hope some of that was good. I kind of I felt a little rambly.
I resonated a lot with the fact that you don't get told how to play with feel, how to play in time, and by listening to people like this and seeing how they're doing it. Like, I mean, just right at the tail end, they're playing a Steve Gadd-esque, solo. That's obviously encompassing knowing his feel, knowing to an extent his vocabulary, and then being able to, play something that sounds like Steve Gadd. I guess that's a skill in a way, but maybe something you want to, steer. I don't know. It's not a party trick, but it's something it's nice to hear,
Yeah, and I bring that up because I just did a lesson about that. So there's the Asia solo, obviously, which is drum canon, and then there's the MSM clinic, where he explains the sort of motifs that are in that solo. And quite by accident, I just had those running through my head, like when I woke up in the morning. Yeah. And the sort of six stroke roll thing too. So yeah, I just decided to try to do a lesson about it. And you're absolutely right. Matthew, there's a little bit of a quicksand where you have to observe other people's vocabulary, but you have to transition through it and make it your own.
Right.
You don't want to be playing completely in a vacuum where you're never absorbing anything else, because that's why humans have iPhones and we're not still living in trees, is the ability to learn from others. But you don't want to just freeze in place sounding exactly like somebody else, or like a poor imitation of somebody else either.
Yeah. We got a nice question from the chat here. I think you could probably speak a lot to. What do you think are the pitfalls of practice habits that are a waste of time?
I'm actually thinking this through. So I made a course about this 2 years ago, and I went through something like 1,000 survey results. And the three most common problems people had with it were they were alternating between feeling like they were in a rut and they never practiced anything new, and feeling like, on the other hand, they were jumping from shiny object to shiny object without
Sure.
spending long enough on any one thing to get good at it. And also that what they were practicing wasn't coming through in their real life playing. And when I queried people, what are your actual practice routines? It was those two sides of the spectrum. So people with 3 hours of practice, practicing out of the same books for years on end and doing the same things in the same order every time. So I'm going to spend 2 hours warming up and doing rudiments before I even get to anything else, before I give myself permission to improvise or play beats or anything else. And they'd alternate between that and burning out on that and just grabbing things at random from Instagram. So I think it's that people aren't finding the sweet spot. There's the whole Anders Ericsson deliberate practice thing, which it's really easy to see. And one thing that made it crystal clear to me was when, just for fun, I was like trying to learn jazz solos whistling. I made a video about that a few years ago that got like 0 views, which I was upset about because it's still one of my proudest achievements.
But you didn't hashtag
it's
jazz whistling.
When that movement starts, like if somebody else gets famous for that, I'm going to be really angry.
Yeah, it should have been a mouth trumpet.
I was going to say, I really like the Nate Wood interview that you have, and what he was saying about the way he practices and flows and interprets vocabulary, and how he was talking about the way he felt about Tony Williams, how he was a direct channel between, kind of like the ether and like the drums. He was just channeling that flow and just extending his own his own vocabulary through the drums. And like just the way that Nate Wood was talking about to you, the way that he practices was just mind blowing to me, only because I felt like I was in a stage where once I kind of like cracked that code of like, because I kind of practice in a similar way that Nate does in terms of like internalizing vocabulary and like flowing and like using kind of like a theme and building around that theme and like manipulating that theme to like kind of like bend concepts and like extend vocabulary. I think that was such a beautiful, well put video on how to really like build a habit to get yourself out of those ruts.
Yeah. Yeah, Nate's a very disciplined player in a few ways. One of the things I respect most about him is that he's got his influences, but he's just unapologetically doing his own thing. And he's not trying to look cool at all, except when he'll just like, pull out some chops at a gig, sort of halfway to satirize it. But I think very often the real pioneers, when you think about people like Nate or Marcus Gilmore is another recent one, or Nashit Waits, I guess those are mainly on the jazz side, but there's so much you have to say no to. It's like Chris Dave. How much stuff did he say no to develop that completely new style? Where it's so easy for a lot of us to get caught up in what's cool in the moment, and that's valid too. Like there are a lot of great drummers who are sort of their moment, but on that, Nate's very much on the unapologetic about having his own influences, doing his own thing, side of that spectrum. And I think that's reflected in the practice discipline too. It's like, speaking of shortcuts, one shortcut is to do the very difficult things and to increase your endurance for the difficult things. And one difficult thing is being patient enough to stick with the motif and work with it over and over again and suck with it at first and then not burn out and just jam, but to stick with it until you really mold it into something. And I'll admit that I haven't always been that disciplined. Like a lot of my practice consists of just improvising at different tempos. And recently with the Steve Gadd stuff and some other things, like I've discovered that a little more. But I think if there is a secret to like some of the Instagram stars, the sort of Andy Prados, it's having that discipline to stick with a few things long enough for them to be optimal. They're not doing the same books every day for 3 years, but at the same time, they're militantly committed to like one motif that they're obsessed with, and they're going to shed that for 5 hours. So that's definitely a thing.
Hell yeah. I also like that. I don't know. I feel like early in those interview times, like you interviewed Nate, you interviewed Casa overall. What was what was interviewing Casa
he's
like?
great.
Because Casa was, younger. He's still to me like one of the younger drummers that kind of came out of like, to me like playing alongside Terry Lynn and Jerry Allen and all these like amazing musicians. Yeah, what was interviewing Casa? What did you learn from that?
He's another guy who's like just doesn't give a shit in the best way, and like he's an extremely hard worker, but he's working hard on his thing. And as such, like he doesn't sound like anybody else, and he's got that kind of like zero fucks, like fuck you money type of swag too, that just permeates. It's like, so, I'm sure it's more complicated than this, and he would say there are shades of gray, but he has this aura of somebody who's very at peace with his own creativity, who's not sort of beholden to anybody, and that allows him to just sort of be nimble and jump in and out of frame as it suits him. The other side to Casa is just he's very conscientious about sort of bringing the spiritual, and I have no idea if he's religious or not, so I don't mean this in a religious way, but just sort of the soul and the emotional side into drumming. And I think this made it into the interview, but one thing he said to me, because I was saying like, I don't feel like my drumming's heavy enough. It feels lightweight. Like I hear you play, you're committed to every note means something. And it's funny because looking back on that, whatever, 7 years later, I understand, oh, that's flow. And that is the entire thing. Like that's literally the thing. Like that's what everything distills down to, right? Like that's the grand unified theory. But Casa's response to that was like, you might think that it's practice that's going to get you there, but you might have a life experience where when you're on the other end of that, all of a sudden your playing has an import that it didn't before. And it's rare to meet somebody where like they say one thing and that one thing, like you can recall it anytime, morning, noon, or night, and there's sort of a before and after hearing that.
Wow. will there be any more interviews like that in the future, maybe? Or is that
I should,
maybe, I don't know. I feel like that's a great way to get into deep kind of, I mean, kind of what we're doing here, trying to get kind of deep on other people's perspectives.
yeah, it's interesting, right? Because I I leaned into doing more lessons and fewer interviews. I think maybe just because I didn't feel like I was the greatest interviewer. And at the time, I was listening to a lot of comedy podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess probably the contemporary things would be like Tiger Belly or Fighter and the Kid, and it's like they're so entertaining, and just by virtue of their profession and their talents, like any audio with professional comedians talking to each other is going to be magnetic and interesting. And listening back to like some of the questions I asked, I sort of wondered like, does anyone really care? Am I the best person to facilitate these people having deep thoughts? I guess like, and maybe the point isn't what they say so much as just hearing them play or how they play.
Yeah.
So it's a challenge. I didn't feel like I could gain command over storytelling in that medium the same way I can with just narrative lesson building, I guess,
Sure.
or not without a ton of editing. Like the sort of documentary style where you film a 2 hour interview and you take 15 minutes of that interspersed with playing. Like, have you guys seen the Chris Potter Underground thing with Nate Smith and Craig Taborn?
Uh-uh.
It's like an hour-long documentary where they follow them to a live gig at the 55 bar. It's almost like Sting Bring on the Night, except it's following Chris Potter's band.
Oh wow.
I gotta watch that. That sounds very
That sounds
interesting.
Oh my God, you get ready, guys.
cool.
It's 420, fire up a blunt, get a glass of Courvoisier, and get ready. But that, to make that interesting on screen, it just seemed like that's like documentary filmmaker territory, and I wasn't sure I had the time to really
Sure.
make it good, I guess. But I'm interested in you all's input, because you're obviously doing something that's resonating with people. And by the way, I hope I'm not boring your
No,
guests.
man.
No,
No,
no.
no. No, I mean, I
But
think
yeah,
it's.
do you think that people would like more interviews?
I think I just like anyone in the drum world, they have access to other drummers, and you, I think, can have access to different people than I do, than people that Brandon does, and you've
Mhm.
already had access to these people. I would love to. I would love more content like
I
that.
would, I literally would, like, I'm just gonna be honest. There was like a while, like, I just took a whole break of Netflix. Like, I just didn't want to watch that shit anymore. And like, I subscribed to like 2017 when I was like coming out of like a big like rut in my playing, and I was like, man, this guy literally, like, even like the interviews especially, and just like the niche. It was like you hit all the niche notes that I was like, man, no one is really shining light on these concepts. And I've thought about these things, and like just the way that you organize it, and just how niche you can get with some of these videos is just like awesome, because it's like it's like you always cover these things that is on all of our minds, and yet,
Yeah,
I feel like nobody wants to talk about it or knows how to really shine the light on some of these concepts that you cover. But like, just the way that you cover it is just like, that shit is prime time entertainment for me. Like, I mean, I think I've been watching every episode since like 2017, and like that's just because like your content is like some of the only drum content I consume on the internet that's like, on like a YouTuber, a drum YouTuber, like, just because it's so hip to what the fuck is actually fucking going on right now in like the drum community, or like, it's really at the forefront. And like, for you to do like interviews the way that you do, man, like my bassist plays drums and he plays just as good as me, and we're like very inspired by Nate Wood, Mark Juliana, and their thing when they switch, you know. And like, when we started my band, started really rehearsing, we were watching all those videos, and he showed me the Nate Wood interview, and I'd never seen it. I saw it like about November last year, and it just like, man, you know, we just smoke weed and watch your shit, and like it's good because it's like we're not just like fucking off. Like, you know, there's some good content, and you know, we can always really learn something from that. And like I learned a ton from that video. I learned a ton from all your videos, and I think just having that essence of bringing awareness to a lot of like what's happening right now, or like even in general, is very important for the community, and even just like young people on YouTube. Like, you know, like if I was super young and I stumbled upon your videos, I mean, I'm gonna be a crazy player. Like I'm sure there's a lot of youngins that are watching your stuff that are gonna turn into really crazy players just because you're shining light on important concepts and important players, you know.
Yeah, well, that's humbling to hear, and it is interesting because sometimes there is kind of a tree falling in the woods thing with it, where you're like, is this really resonating with anybody? So that's great to hear, and it's interesting because yeah, it's very flattering that occasionally I'll run across drummers who like sound way better than I do, but you know, volumes, and they'll say like, oh, you know, I've been watching your stuff since way back, and I'll be like, all right, well, payback time, motherfucker. Like, how did you take my stuff and get so much better? Like, it's my turn. Like, teach me now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like, what did you do?
Yeah.
For everyone that doesn't know too, I think it might be a good nice time just to kind of highlight, you know, like Nate's website here, the 8020drummer.com.
2014 vintage Squarespace website.
Look at this. Look at this beauty.
I'm getting this redone, guys, by the way. Over the summer, we're gonna make it look slick.
I could say, you know, as a person who took your coaching course and did the, you know, the package where you get, you know, feedback. I thought that was really good and really nice to be able to. I mean, you say you don't do one-on-one feedback, but you do video responses, or does that not happen anymore?
Well, funny you should mention that, because I made the mistake of sending an email out to my list. Matthew, you probably saw it because you're a former student. Just asking like, hey, what kind of appetite is there for one-on-one Zoom coaching or group Zoom coaching if it's just offensively expensive? And unfortunately, people got back to me and said, yes, we're interested in this. So now I might have to launch the damn thing and figure out a way to give people enough value for their money. But I guess it's a good problem to have, but it's like one of those like music business problems where it's like, holy shit, this is real. And now I need to actually build out something amazing because people are expecting something amazing. Right. But long story short, like I may return to live coaching very soon, albeit maybe group coaching.
Do you find yourself getting kind of overwhelmed by your internet, maintaining your internet life versus, you know, your real life? I know you do a bunch. No? Okay, that's good. You compartmentalize well then.
Yeah, and also maybe to my detriment, I really don't give a shit about like vanity internet metrics or image, and it's I'm lucky that it's sort of built into my brand that I'm the guy that's like that doesn't read the room very well, at least when it comes to drums. So presumably there are fewer hands feeding me that I need to worry about offending, because it's like what you see is what you got. But I cut you off. I'm sorry. What was going to be the other half of your question?
No, that was pretty much it. You answered right after I stopped.
I was gonna say, like, I think the essence that you hold with that of like, you know, what you see is what you get, and just like not really feeding into the image is like, I think that's just like what we need, only because it's like there's no, it's just like straight to the point. Like me, I'm trying to like see what's going on like at the forefront. Like it doesn't have to look pretty as long as it's like resonating with the truth of like what's happening now, you know?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
feel like that's way more important. Like, and like even, I mean, you know, like even like I could tell there's so much time and care into the videos. Like you can't even not see it, you know? Like it's just so it's there, and like it's so strong because there's so many little attentions to detail within just the editing, and like even just like the content that you're talking about is always, you know, just so, I think, just right on the dot, I think. And I feel like it's good that you don't care about the image, because man, people talk shit all the time for no reason. That's just the internet. That's what it is.
Yeah. I should qualify and say, like, there are a few things that I care about a lot. And one of them is like video views and mailing list opt-ins and sales to a degree, because this is my living.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I'm lucky to have it in perspective when people make mean comments, or when like I'm not I'm not the hottest trending thing on Instagram. Like Instagram matters fuck all with regard to my course sales, for instance. Like it's a fun place to be. It's a good place to go for inspiration. Like I can post videos to kind of test myself with the camera on. But you know, when I see some of these documentaries about influencers who like go crazy, like that's not something that afflicts me. What I will do is stay up late at night, like looking at different video metrics and wondering like, I thought this one was going to be fire on YouTube. Why isn't it taking off? Like, am I sandboxed? did they blacklist me? Like, why isn't the algorithm doing right by me? And one thing I'm getting from this conversation is like, I think there may be something to having one or two videos a month where I just like don't even look at the metrics at all. Just make the video I would make if I didn't give a shit about the views at all. And to this day, like a lot of my favorites are ones that just tanked when it came to views. Like I had one where I was talking about when it's okay to criticize people on the internet, and I was pushing back against this idea that like we all just have to be nice to each other always, and that any critique of somebody else is always a bad thing. And you know, I did this asynchronous thing where I was on an airplane and then walking through the streets of Japan, and like we knitted it all together. I'm like, this is gonna be amazing, and it got like 2% of the views that like a popular video does, but I still.
I wanted to
Hmm?
ask. I wanted to ask. I think you have like the practice pad video, right? Where you go into detail if it's actually worth it to have like practice pad chops, right? That's a video you have.
Hmm.
How well did that video do? I'm just interested because I feel like that video is super important, but I don't know if it would translate to everybody.
So I don't want to bore your guests by like switching windows and actually looking up the metrics. I think it probably did medium well. I think it might have done like 30 or 40K at the time, and maybe it's sleeper crept its way to 50 or 60 since then. Uh, it definitely wasn't one of the flagship videos. Yeah, though, speaking of the New Zildjian practice pads, right? And that's something where it's it's a hot button. And it's funny because I don't talk about politics on the channel at all, but it's like there are a couple of things that I touched that turned out to be third rails that inspired a lot of hate, and practice pads were definitely one of them. And people strawman me. I don't hate practice pads. I just think like they're not the be all end all, and people assume that there's a straight line that goes from practice pad to drum kit facility directly, and I think that's false.
Mhm.
I rarely hit the pad, to be honest. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I mean, if I'm out camping, you know, I'll have a pad, but you know, I'd rather practice, you know, feel a snare, you know, because I'm gonna be playing a snare
Yeah.
and drums.
Yeah. I think the pad solves a problem for getting in reps with basic gross motor movements
Yeah.
when you're in a context where you can't make too much noise.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky enough to have a practice studio with 3 hours a day. So that literally is never a situation for me. Like I have the luxury of being able to play on a real snare drum 100% of the time. So yeah, you're exactly right. Like I played a practice pad for a video. I think for the Drumeo one last year, I actually played on a wooden shelf because I didn't have my practice pad. Which again is not to disparage. There are certain times in your development when like it's kind of like the first 5 miles of the marathon type of thing, where having a really, really faithful rebound that feels exactly like a drum is less important. And just getting your body to feel a stick rebounding and like doing your full strokes and playing from the wrist, playing from the fingers. You can do it on a wooden shelf, except that would damage it. You can do it on a pillow. It really doesn't matter. So the practice pad's probably the best compromise for that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, maybe it's nice to talk about too. Like, sometimes you hit some like, how do I say this? You get hit like hot button like issues like with that practice pad video or something like that. Like, obviously it's something that like your dad's drum instructor would be like, no, you gotta hit the pad first before, and then I'll buy you a drum set. Type of stuff. Are you searching, or at any time are you thinking like, oh man, this is gonna get a lot of flack, I'm gonna make that video? When you're considering views or something like that, and you can choose to answer that or not. I don't know. I don't want to put your formula out there. I'm just kidding, but
So I never I can't say I've ever tried to be controversial just for controversy's sake.
sure.
So to come back to Logan and Jake Paul, like I don't wake up in the morning thinking like, what's the most controversial bottom of the brainstem thing I can produce. It's more like if I feel like there's lazy groupthink on one side and that's pissing me off. Like one thing is, and I won't name names, but somebody came out with a really disparaging video about drum covers. And I just made a mental note. For a minute last summer, I had a free the drum cover hashtag on Instagram, which was sort of a shot across the bow. But I still have in my head that I want to make a video that's like in defense of the drum cover. Yeah, another one that got me in a lot of trouble is like everybody's knee-jerk assumption that Buddy Rich needs to be in everybody's top 5 list. And
yeah,
I knew I'd get some pushback for that.
I was thinking about that one in particular. Like that one, it just raised some hell with some drummers, and like man, you guys get over it. People can have opinions,
Yeah.
and I don't know. Maybe it's more or less. I really admire the fact that you're putting it out there like how you're seeing it, how you call it, and it's yeah, as an onlooker, it is funny sometimes to see, to watch people be like, whoa, like nope, like Buddy Rich is number 1, and now forever I'm unsubscribing. Like, no, that's not what it's about. It's about like having a deep conversation, or having any conversation about who wants to, I don't know, Buddy Rich. Yeah, it's just it's a hot button issue with some people, and I think it's funny.
Yeah. Yeah, and to be honest, if I'd known it was going to get that much pushback, I probably wouldn't have leaned in as much. I assumed I would get some mild pushback, but I assume most of the people who were subscribed to me would already kind of agree. Look, I think we've all got our overrated, underrated lists,
Sure.
And it's sort of a matter of what hills we want to die on. And yeah, at the same time as is wanting to keep the conversation candid. You know, I don't necessarily believe in being controversial just for controversial sake. But I will say, like, getting up every Friday, and I know I have to write a video. It's a lot easier if there's something I'm fired up about that I'm inspired to write my way through, because I don't want to make a video that's just mailing it in or schlock. So if I'm like, I guess I should make a video about this, and then I see some sort of lazy hot take on the internet, or some platitude, or some groupthink thing, you know, another one is, don't practice with the metronome because it'll make you feel too robotic, right? Like, that's one that's pinned to the dartboard. Yeah, so it just makes it easier if there's something I can get fired up about.
What's your process as far as, you know, what, like, you know, you said you wake up on Friday and you have to write a video. So do you, like, yeah, what is your process, concept to completion on any said video?
So it changed a couple of years ago. It changed in 2019, in part inspired by people like Adam Neely. And there's a YouTuber called Alex, the French guy cooking, who I think is one of the best YouTubers out there. But before that, as you guys might remember from the OG days, I would literally just set up a mic and just go top of my head, like I was giving a clinic, and then just tape it. And maybe I'd do a couple run throughs to get the concept really, really good, but just went off the top of my head. And I don't know, I think Adam and Alex and a few other people opened my eyes to the possibility of scripting. Ooh, another one is Johnny Harris. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him. He used to make videos for Vox, but he's just like the king of explaining something. And I became fascinated with giving a video lecture that just had like ready at hand examples for anything you might want to show, and being able to use that to break down a concept, and the potential in condensing thought into 10 or 15 minutes by virtue of scripting. Whereas if you were going off the top of your head, you might need to ramble for an hour and then cut that down. Well, I'm too lazy to do that. I want to have 20 minutes of actual footage that gets edited down into 15 minutes a lesson. So the process usually looks like my starting with a blank Evernote and just scripting, and I'll write it like a shitty screenplay with like stage directions and cuts and everything. And my video editor and I have sort of worked out a choreography where over the years he knows what I want, so I can just I can kind of sketch a scene, and like I'll let him fill in the details, and he does a lot of cool artistic stuff. Whereas at the beginning, I used to have to sort of be super literal about it. But if it's something like my cargo cult lesson from whatever 2 months ago, like that's very involved. It's completely scripted, and there are like 150 shots of B-roll. They're specific because I'm trying to. It's basically like a lecture I'm trying to give. In this case, about the danger of extrapolating from watching good players about what it takes to be a good player. But other times, like, and especially this is a hack, if it's been a long week and I want to make something people will like without wasting too much work on it. So this past week, I was doing the Steve Gadd thing, right? So the script will look like intro, like with the clips of Steve I want to highlight, but then it'll just be like drum teaching segment 1. And it'll just be like teach in brackets. And so then I'll just sort of sit down and with the mic in front of me and work it out, and the video editor will cut it down to like a type 5. But that's mostly what it looks like. And then it goes to the video editor, and I always have that Christmas morning moment when he sends it back. Usually it's amazing. Sometimes we have to do a few back and forths, but yeah, that's one of the best parts of my week is like seeing the completed video, seeing what was on the page like come to life. Hopefully.
Yeah. So, uh, have you always had a video editor, or is that something you incorporated more into the development of your channel?
Off and on for years. At the beginning, I edited everything myself, and when I was transitioning into this more Adam Neely, Johnny Harris style and narrative, at the first couple videos, I edited everything myself, just because I was like, oh, this is so specific. Like the comic timing needs to be perfect, the cuts, where I want a song to fade out, where I want it to stop abruptly at exactly the right spot.
Yeah.
And for a few months, I was like, there's no way I can outsource this to an editor because it's just way too specific. And a few friends sort of talked me into trying it. And sure enough, over the ensuing few months, we developed a process. And he's much more of a subject matter expert at editing than I am. So the fit and finish is going to be better. The cuts are going to be cleaner. The sound's going to be better. The color treatment. So now that we have that process,
Sure.
yeah, and I hope he never stops editing, because I don't know what I would do. I'd have to go back to editing everything myself.
Dang. Very cool. That's I love the collaboration there. I feel like a lot of people like, I mean, that gives you just as much time to like focus on the content versus, the the back half of all that.
Yeah,
It's
it
I
probably
like
saves me
I like that
16
it's a
hours a
team.
week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So back to my original question. So concept to completion, you're writing everything on Friday. You send it out
Mm-hmm.
on Friday, and you're posting it on like a Monday, or like how's
So
that?
it's tight. Like a lot of people will bank a few videos, but we're right close to the wire at 8020 HQ. Like, I don't have any content banked, which I need to do because I'm traveling again, finally going back to see my parents this summer after 2 years. But yeah, so it'll be right on Friday morning, record on Friday afternoon, then touch up the script, label the clips, put them in some kind of order on G Drive and send it off. And then usually by Sunday afternoon, I'll get the first draft back. And then, there's a thumbnail process too, but usually I post and schedule for like Thursday morning, 7:15 a.m. Eastern.
Got it. So it's right up top of people's stuff. That's awesome.
Yeah, and then just try not to check the numbers too many times during the day.
I feel that. Um, well, cool. Um, Something that I always think is interesting is what all the drummers kind of do on their non-music, non-drummer time. I noticed
Mm-hmm.
I've seen your stuff. You do a lot of martial arts stuff. Has any of that like what else do you do? What else is fun? What do you do as like as a human in the world rather than just music and videos and drumming?
Well, it changed a lot in 2020, but uh, yeah, jiu-jitsu is huge. I got into that like 5 years ago, so it wasn't it's not as long standing a hobby as drums, obviously. Um, love travel, love eating. It's funny because one of my jiu-jitsu friends this morning was telling me I don't have any hobbies. I'm like, I like travel, I like eating. He's like, those are not hobbies. Um, but yeah, that's mainly it. Like I'm obsessed with like getting a cool airplane seat for my award miles to like just the right destination.
Kind of like credit card
And
hacking. Yeah.
hell yeah, like, like I'll go deep into the YouTube universe about like, oh yeah, like Delta One is playing their new suites on the 7.6 like 400. Like fuck, maybe I can get a ticket to Nam. And of course, because it's post COVID, like ticket prices are super low too. So like the 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 working man can afford some of the more premium seats. I'm like, oh, maybe I can lock that in, and so I'll spend like an evening surfing the internet for that. but yeah, also that redounds into like some real travel and going to some cool destinations and like basically like I would love to be the Casey Neistat of drums. Like I really wanted the channel to be more about traveling, playing clinics in far-flung places, like sampling food, having experiences.
Kind of more like a vlog.
That's still the goal, even though COVID took a big bite out of it.
Do y'all remember the early JP Bouvet vlogs? Do y'all remember those?
How early? Like subbing for Matt Halpern that early or earlier?
Earlier, like I remember he vlogged the whole Guitar Center, like you know how he won Guitar Center drum off, right?
Right.
He vlogged that whole shit, man. What the fuck? The whole time, like on top of all of that and winning, he vlogged it all, which is crazy. And then he was vlogging like Berkeley shit, you know, how it was at Berkeley and like vlogging gigs, and it was just crazy, just like insane.
Yeah. JP's my spirit animal. Like that guy's so smart and creative and irreverent. Scary talented both at the drums and also like as an on-camera personality. And I'm
Yeah.
just lucky that he didn't have the same idea I had in like 2014. Like luckily he was having more success in the legit world, so he didn't lean so hard on the internet because it would have been game over.
Yeah.
Hey, we have what belt? What BJJ belt are you?
I am a one stripe blue after 4 years and change.
Oh.
And yeah, I really don't give a shit about belts. So you know there are ways to get promoted quickly, like going to the right people's classes religiously. And there got to be a time at the end of my white belt when I was like, okay, like all my friends got promoted, like I'm gonna start hanging around. Then my friends started to whisper, like, you should go to this guy's class. I'm like, really, you should go to this guy's class. And like, so the first time I go, like I get promoted, which is not to say, by the way, martial arts. How do I put this? Martial arts does not always play nicely with the kind of candor and like soul bearing that we're used to in the YouTube podcast world, because it's a very old tradition with a lot of legit dangerous human beings who, even if they're sweethearts, like have given up their heart and soul, risk injury, like put a lot on the line. So as a novice in that world, I do not want to be seen to be making light of any of it. And in particular, the teacher who promoted me does not do promotions lightly. So I'm in no way saying that that it was frivolous, or that my academy, which I'm not going to name, but if you guys follow me on Instagram, you'll probably read between the lines. But I'm not saying that they in any way do sort of grade inflation or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Be that as it may, there are ways that if you're interested in that, and you want to make sure that as soon as you reach the requisite ability and not years after that, you get promoted. There are ways to do that. And since COVID, hit, like I've been training with a sort of private pod of folks, and like nobody knows what belt anybody is. So maybe someday I'll make it higher up the ranks. Currently, I'm just focused on improving my game.
Wow. And so do you ever? I'm sure you get asked this all the time. Like, do you ever get concerned about that interfering with your drumming, like injury wise? Or have you?
No, and maybe I should.
Yeah. Have you ever been concussed?
No,
Oh, that's nice.
luckily.
That's nice.
Oh, I
Yeah,
want.
I've had. Go
I
ahead,
was,
sorry.
I was gonna ask, what do you like the mental gain from participating in jujitsu? Does it what do you really do it for, like internally?
Yeah, so I think that in Waitzkin's book we were talking about earlier, The Art of Learning, he was talking about having that sort of cross domain idea of learning, and once you know the way broadly you see it in all things, I think you really understand what flow is. because you can feel when you're in flow in jiu-jitsu and when you're out of flow. And it's the same with drums. I mean, there are a lot of differences. One is the drums don't fight you back. And obviously in jiu-jitsu, you're responding to another human being's inputs. But there's a similar kind of thing where when it feels like everything's hooked up and you're able to, your head's a bit able to be ahead of the game. Yeah, this also kinesthetically, like you guys know how it feels kinesthetically on the drums to play something that lands and stick the landing and have your sort of your auditory senses and your physical senses just synergize in a great way.
Yeah.
And like hitting a guard pass or like spinning to the other side when somebody turtles, or like sinking that Kimura hook on the left hand while you put your foot hook in with the other side, or even just like bench pressing somebody off of you and getting a knee in when you're trying to escape bottom side control. Those are all the same thing, and it's very, very hard to go back to regular exercise like running on a treadmill or something. It would be like experiencing really, really good VR and then going
like
back to
that flow state. Like it's like the moment, the forefront of the moment, like with improvisation, because technically I feel like both could be considered like somewhat of like improvisation, right? Like if you kind of like take, like, you have to like be in the moment and improvise given the situation, jiu-jitsu, like whatever your opponent gives you, and then you have to like improvise, like let's say maybe in the jazz context.
It's very similar. Yeah. And when people talk about it being a language, I think a language is a great analogy too, where you have the vocabulary and you're putting it together. There are rules, there are ways you can break the rules. There's some free association, there's experimentation, there's risk taking. So there are stakes. Like with the drums, it's having a buffering error in front of an audience. We're playing something you don't intend to. Like, I let it hang out on that fill, and we did not land that. With jiu-jitsu, it's obviously like being humiliated in front of your friends, which happens on the regular. Like, how come you're just letting him do that to you? Why don't you try to escape? Well, I'm trying, bro.
That's why I started playing soccer, because it helped me with high stake improvisation, like just high stake situations that have to do with improvisation. Either it's life or like music. So like definitely me starting to play soccer way more every week, definitely just even like endurance wise has made me way stronger. And even getting a personal trainer, that in soccer has made me way like I have such a high level of stamina now, to where like my mind can be clear enough the whole time to make these decisions in the moment, rather than having to compensate through fatigue and not being as clear minded about making artistic decisions, and just decisions that have to do with like expression.
Yeah, you sound like you'd be a nightmare to roll with, by the way. Like somebody super athletic with a lot of endurance. Those guys are the worst. They just tire you out. You can beat them technically, and then they just squeeze out, and like they're fresh, and you're all tired. And that's frustrating thing. But yeah, I think, and with soccer, like that's a team sport too. So it's almost more analogous to playing in a band. I did soccer very, very briefly in high school, and I was never any good at it. But there's a pressure moment when the team's trying to put together a play, and like the ball comes to you. Like, are you gonna deliver in the moment, or are you gonna fold? So it's this kind of synergy of your personal skill with performing under pressure, where like the team goal is on the line, isn't it?
Yeah, love it. I
I love all that.
love the chaos, the having to put order within extreme levels of chaos. That's my favorite, no matter what it is.
Oh, man.
Nice. Well, I'm gonna hide behind you when the apocalypse comes. Then
Oh my god, no. I'm gonna hide behind you. You're the trained fighter over
Yeah,
here.
bro. We're all going to Brooklyn, kicking it at Nate's house.
I need to learn some striking first. Then I guess unless zombies like takedowns. I just don't think you'd want to be that close to somebody's face if he's trying to eat your brain, right?
Somebody's rotting
There's
flesh.
probably a lot of like, yeah, there'd be a learning curve with like adapting your jujitsu to a zombie apocalypse. You like definitely want to maintain distance from the jaw.
6 feet at least. Yeah.
Yeah.
You also mentioned some food, man. I know you're. Correct me if I'm wrong. Your partner runs a cooking YouTube channel.
Yeah. She's got a cooking blog slash Instagram property, which are sort of the biggest elements. Yeah, she's huge. She's way bigger than I am.
So do you both kick it with cooking? When you guys live together? Obviously, I'm asking dumb questions, but you guys.
Yeah, yeah.
So like, yeah. Who? I mean, what's your favorite dish, either that she cooks or that you like to make?
So I, I told you that I like food. And that's entirely mostly on the eating side. Like
Got it.
I haven't really dabbled with cooking except for like the few basic things I make, like steak or eggs. But yeah, she's got such a just comprehensive palette of things she can sort of free associate. Like she is a musician, first of all. We were at MSM together, so she's like a world class classical pianist.
All right. Cool. I didn't know
But
that.
her cooking skill, like she's able to just like, I guess sort of like Chopped or whatever, like she's functioning at a level like she understands without even experimenting what flavor a certain thing is going to add, and so she can kind of assemble a dish in her mind from first
Yeah.
principles. Like she's functioning on that level, and I'm just like, which way do I cut it?
Man, I want to
I
get
think
there.
well, I saw this cooking book. They kind of broke it down. What was it? It was called
Oils, fats, and something like that.
yes. It was that one, man. It was
Yeah.
that one.
What's
It is
oils, fats,
acidity, no
acid,
acids,
and something else. Yeah, it's
oils,
four of
fat,
them.
yeah, oils, fats, yeah. It's kind of a whole orchestral deal, right? The cooking shit, because it's like you really have to know how to prepare. You have to prepare things, and you have to balance things out, and then you have to sometimes you have to cook things certain ways for a certain amount of time, or else it's fucked.
Right.
Mhm.
Like this is a whole ordeal. It's crazy.
Well, yeah, she's got a whole teaching business around it, and there are a lot of big problems to solve. And for her niche, she specializes in like paleo and keto and gluten free. Although in in our own lives, she we like to cook and eat everything. But so there are a lot of challenges around like, oh, okay, so I'm eating keto now because I've got celiac disease, but I don't know how to create any of the flavors that I used to be able to, because I did it all with like carbs and cheese. So she's got the cooking chops and the sort of flavor palette to draw on to teach people how to create amazing flavors out of basically anything. So it solves that problem for people. Because I
That's,
know, yeah. Anyway,
that's so awesome.
we're talking about a lot of cooking.
Cooking is fine. Cooking is good. I think it's good to have the human part of these podcasts and these interviews as well. Um, Man, so New York in 6 months, the music scene. What's it gonna be?
Okay, I'm
What's New York's
not the
deal?
best person to ask about this because I'm a little bit less of a scene stir. Um, Somebody I direct this question to is my friend Jesse Simpson, who's a great jazz drummer and a cymbal maker. And like, he's the guy who you post on Facebook, like, what are the sessions? And he's got like a list of 15 of them.
Oh damn.
Um, but I do keep up with my friends on Instagram and Facebook and see where people are playing gigs and walk down the street and see what's open. 6 months also requires a lot of thinking about virology, doesn't it? In a weird way, because it's like, are we going to have variants that the vaccines don't cover? Knock on wood. Okay, so in a scenario where the vaccines mostly work, we get to herd immunity. If they work in a way sort of like, even if you get COVID or a new strain of COVID, it's like a cold, and then people maybe have a booster every year, like the flu shot. I think we will see New York mostly come back from the capacity standpoint, and it's an open question whether the demand will be there. Like that's what everyone's wondering, right? Like, so the 55 bar, which is probably like the single worst place to go if you're trying to avoid COVID. But I love you guys. 55 bar is great. You should go. But in a world where 75% of New Yorkers are vaccinated, so they reopen the 55 bar. There's Dave Binney, Dan Weiss. Are people going to show up? That's the question, and it goes either way, right? Because you could have an effect where there's a bunch of pent up demand, just like me with the Vanguard band, where it's like, oh well, I didn't appreciate this when I had it, so as soon as I can go back to the Vanguard and see John in person, like I'm going to do that, or get that, that's that specialty hipster cocktail at Smalls. But maybe there will also be some people who are like, yeah, I've gotten 2 years older. I enjoy watching the live streams now. Maybe I don't need to go out. So it's really a dice roll. But I think the other silver lining is that the musicians have had quite the learning curve in terms of how to adapt to a world without live venues. And the whole reason I got on the internet was because I thought the idea that we had a zero-sum game with physical venues in New York was a stupid idea. Why wasn't anyone else availing themselves of the internet? Like, yeah, being live in person to see something is pretty arbitrary. What a venue used to give you was the imprimatur that there's good music there, right? So you're playing at the Vanguard. People go to the Vanguard even when they don't know who's playing. So hence you're guaranteed an audience. But when you have more people like, say, Lewis Cole, who just build their following organically on the internet, Lewis Cole can do a gig in a parking lot or a porta potty, and like it doesn't matter. People can pay him on Patreon. So I also hope that COVID exposed a bunch of other musicians to the stuff that the sort of internet outcasts were hip to in 2014.
Sure.
I think people are starving. They're thirsty and they're starving, and the first chance they get to be able to go see some real quality music, I think they're gonna really hop on it. Because I don't know, I saw Mike Mitchell in Dallas November, and that was bussin'. That was crazy. He did a whole tour in Florida. He's doing a whole tour in Florida right now. He's going on.
Florida, where the pandemic doesn't exist.
Yeah, and it's like
there's no pandemic in Florida.
Yeah, like no one cares. Yeah, no one gives a shit. And I think, I mean, even like the show I played, like everyone just barely. I mean, it's very chill in the South. Like I'm Texas, Texas is some other shit. You know what I'm saying? We've been trying to annex for the last fucking 500 years or whatever.
Secede, you mean?
Huh?
Secede, you mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Secede. And like, yeah, man, like people like that show I played, like, people were ready, man. We were so ready right now. Like, it feels good. It feels good. It's like, I mean, now that everyone's taking precautions, and getting the vaccine, and like still being responsible and like caring about the community. Like now, like things are tipping over, I guess, here in Texas, and it feels really. I'm grateful to have because I got hit up to do because of the show. I got hit up to do like a warehouse private event. So that's what's the new wave. It's like private event with an art installation and light show that's going to be limited tickets.
Mm-hmm.
And I think and you probably have to have a vaccine.
Yeah,
Or
exclusivity might be the name of the game. Like, and I think I have a feeling that we're trying to get out of that. Like, we don't want it to be like, there's the rumor of the whole like vaccine passport, which is such a weird thing to say because then it's just to me it kind of excludes people that don't have the vaccine, and
I
maybe
mean,
it should
it's
exclude people that don't have the vaccine, but some people that aren't getting the vaccine like can't get the vaccine even though they want the vaccine, which is
I mean,
very
it's not
controversial.
yeah, it's not excluding people who don't have it. It's just like, that's what makes a lot of people comfortable to go places, but
Sure.
some people, without vaccine still feel comfortable. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And like I just think, and like that event that we were gonna do, they're gonna try to stream it, not stream it, but record it as well. And I feel like just the multimedia, kind of like extravaganza with these gigs, I think is very important. Like people should be playing gigs that people can choose to go participate in, and also be able to see online. At the same time, like it's like the best of both
Hybrid
worlds.
gigs, just like that.
Yeah, hybrid gigs.
Well,
Yeah,
damn.
or non-hybrid gigs. Like you have a certain number that people can watch online, but then you have other ones where they have to physically be there and there's no recording.
There's that too. There's that too here. I mean, like the one I played. I mean, you either were there or you weren't.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which
And
is
just from a marketing standpoint, if I were a band, that's what I would do. I
yeah.
mean, there's some stuff that's in front of the paywall, there's some stuff that's behind the paywall. And
Uh-huh.
yeah, the portable audience thing, like the more people are hip to the fact that you build a following using the internet, and real life gigs, but getting people to sign up for your mailing list or whatever. And then you have more negotiating power with venues. Because I think the whole thing about I take a little bit more of a blue blood position on the whole, like musicians should be paid for performing, where it's like, okay, well, if you're bringing zero audience into a business, then why? And I guess there's like an investment thing, right? Like comedy works, like yeah, there's some curators like Jazz Gallery in New York, right, where you identify somebody who's going to be an up and coming talent and invest in them and promote them. Like
Mhm.
that's great. But if you're a musician and you want to play shows, and again, this is something hopefully COVID accelerated. Like one thing you can do is complain that nobody pays you. Oh, it's another tip jar gig. Another thing you can do is have your own audience, supply your audience to the venue, so you're providing value to them, and or like you know Patreon gig. It's like you'll get a code after you make a $5 donation to Patreon. People ask you for that code at the door, or you can hand them a fiver, right?
Sure.
And we're playing in a warehouse.
Bring your own warehouse gear.
It's honestly, man, I'm at that level where it's like, man, I'm just waiting this shit out, man. I don't know. I'm gonna do what I can to like, you know, push the music, push the sound, support the community, give back, make the money that I can, but also, make it a gradual experience for people and make it safe while we're still waiting for this world to open up. And I think the fact that Austin is now, because you can gig in Austin now. You can just straight up do that. You've been able to gig in Austin since the beginning of the pandemic, low key, but now that things are, that this vaccine is more accessible, and I see that people are ready to go out and stuff, and like just on the marketing standpoint, like I'm taking advantage of that because, my music being what it is at the forefront of this time in Austin, people are that much more ready to see my band, and the momentum that I'm gaining right now through this time. Like people were saying, like we played and like people were like crying, man. Like people were like telling me crazy gnarly shit, and I'm like, whoa, like you know, I gotta be on this tip, I gotta stay on this tip right now. Like, cause I'm like helping people heal through this shit, and it's like, cause people crave it, they
Yeah, that's
want
gotta
that.
feel good.
Yeah, and it's like, and it just makes me feel like, because I'm very like community based, I guess, with like, if I play a gig, I'm definitely gonna bring my own audience. You know what I'm saying? Like that's just like a given. Like people want to come
Mhm.
see and hang, and I want people to feel safe, and like I want them to feel that like, oh, I want to go hang out with them too. Like maybe not like get thready or trashy about it, but like just to go enjoy some music and have conversations. And like I think that's very important, because I don't know, I've never been at that level where it's like, oh, I demand that check and I'm gonna play in front of randos and like know that I'm gonna get that fat check. Like I'm still on that, like I'm bringing like a bunch of money to the bar. You know what I'm saying? And like that's what I'm getting cut. Like what you were saying, you know. But
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, if you've got that ethos, then you'll always have productive relationships with venues, I think.
The gig will always be there for sure when you can bring people. Um, so before we go here, I definitely like to let all our viewers here know that Nate does have a website, the8020drummer.com, where you can go sign up for his mailing list. Um, Go do that right after this. Go do that and have and make sure that you get your 3 videos. Improve your playing in three
Yeah,
weeks.
3 video mini course,
And
vintage like 2016.
yeah, and stay up to date for what Nate's doing. I know we're gonna see plenty of videos coming out the gate here soon. You could also go follow Nate on Instagram here at 8020Drummer. Drop the 8020Drummer, and look at him. There's Nate getting a shot. What's up? And and yeah,
I was like, "Can I take a selfie?" She's like, "I guess."
man, you probably hear that all the time. That's so funny. So at the end of the day, y'all, if there's nothing else, I'd like to say what up to the chat. Make sure if you guys have anything else to say, y'all been quiet, but I know you're here. Now's your time to ask your last question. With that being said, Nate, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the stream today, and I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, it's been fun. It's been fun, guys. I'm glad we were able to make it happen. Yeah, 2 hours felt like it just flew by.
Yeah. And man, keep us updated on what you're doing. If there's anything, any way that we can help, promote what you're doing. Excuse me. Reach out. We'd love to help. And for all of our listeners, make sure you again subscribe to Nate's email list on his website, the8020drummer.com. Follow him on Instagram at 8020drummer. And obviously, if you haven't already, go check out his YouTube channel, 8020drummer. And go get educated, y'all, and go have
go
fun.
get hit. Go get hit right now, man.
Yeah.
Come on, man.
Well, I think that's gonna be it for us, y'all. So let's call it. That was very fun. Again, thank you, Nate. Thank you, Brandon. Let's namaste to y'all. Have a good day.
Appreciate
And,
you, man.
all right, y'all.
Appreciate you.
Let's drop out.
Great.
See y'all.